ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. In today's video, I'm going to talk about a fuel which has created epics, who has created legends, a fuel which has sort of served as a catalyst for a lot of billionaires and millionaires and a lot of so-called legends. But this fuel which I'm going to talk about is not a good fuel for anyone to harbor or for anyone to get catalyzed in the direction of achievement or progress. This fuel, to the contrary, is extremely toxic and bad for our inner well-being. Now you might be wondering, what is this fuel I'm talking about? Now this is an emotion which every human being would have experienced sooner or later to various degrees. This emotion is popularly known as anger. Now, before you start presuming that this video is all going to talk about anger management, I'm going to talk about certain paradigms of this emotion called anger, which at times makes us justify in being consumed by that emotion. Now, one thing to note here is, most of us think that there are certain situations where it is justified to be angry. And if you are not angry, it's a sign of weakness. With all due respect to your paradigm, to your thought process, I would like to ask you a simple question. If anger was a sign of strength, why would Lord Buddha be worshipped as a god? If anger was a sign of strength, we should be having temples of Adolf Hitler, who was supposed to be a man who exhibited a lot of anger. If anger was a sign of strength, all the gangsters and terrorists should have been glorified. But why is it that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi got the title of Father of Nation? This person did not showcase any anger as such. He was an epitome of peace, and he gets garlanded by this title, and he is called Father of Nation. Now you need to contemplate and understand, because oftentimes most of us think, this is how the normal societal conditioning is, that we think that if you are not angry, you will be perceived as weak. Understand this, the people who perceive you as weak are themselves weak, because they don't have a fine-tuned understanding of nature. The only understanding they have is coming from movies, is coming from the way entertainment has sold us different stories, that a hero needs to get angry to be successful. And you will also find people who have reached the peak of their life suggest to you that anger or insult catalyzed me towards my success. It could be true, but what I want to tell you is, the fuel which you are using to catalyze yourself towards success, the side effects of that fuel, the side effects of having that heavy consciousness, the negative aspects of it is more as compared to the positive manifestations. Now let's say someone gets really angry by someone's insult, and the whole purpose of his life now is to prove a point to the other person. Now one thing you want to understand and bring about unbiased understanding, if you observe the situation, this person is motivating all his actions through the benchmark of this person, and once he has proved that point, do you think his motivation will still remain? It won't remain, because his motivation was coming from an external source. Until and unless the motivation is from within, this kind of impediments, this kind of a constant dependency on outside influences will sooner or later lead to a frustrating life in general. Now everybody knows that anger is not good for our health. There's a particular portion in human brain called amygdala, which is sort of responsible for the fight and flight response, and is also the part of the brain which is responsible for all the emotional responses. And when amygdala is continuously triggered, either through anger or fear, there's a hormone called cortisol, which is also known as the stress hormone, which is released in the body. And this cortisol, when is released in a large amount, leads to a lot of diseases. As I keep saying in most of my videos, 95% of all physical ailments are psychosomatic in nature, meaning they have a psychological root cause. There's this book called You Can Heal Your Life by Lucy L. Hay, wherein she has very clearly articulated every disease, every physical possible disease, and the possible emotional root cause. And doctors have validated, medical doctors have validated the authenticity of such a research. And they have found that 95% of the cases, of medical cases, this is true. They are found out to be true. Now, one thing you'll realize, the number one reason we choose to get angry is because somewhere down the line, the way we have been conditioned is we think that if we become angry, we are able to solve the problem. But if you look at history, you will realize that anything which came from this intention, from this consciousness of anger, seldom proved anything or seldom solved anything. But the anger, when it was directed towards a rightful purpose, and that rightful purpose had a right level of consciousness from a right intention. An intention which was not only about proving a point which was personal, but an intention which came about to delivering a common good. Now, Mahatma Gandhi was insulted by the Britishers in that famous incident, the train incident, which probably most of you are aware of. Now, that insult was not something Mahatma Gandhi was fuming with anger with. That insult brought about a subtle understanding in Mahatma Gandhi that a person who was going to be a barrister, a lawyer of his repute, if he was going to be insulted in such a way, just imagine the plight of a common Indian. So that motivated him to launch the freedom movement, and as a result of which we all are sort of enjoying the freedom which we normally take for granted. Now, he was not boiling in anger because of that insult. That insult brought about a subtle understanding, brought about awareness within him as to if this can happen to a barrister of his repute. Just imagine what would be the plight of a common Indian. And that motivated him, that catalyzed him to launch the freedom movement. Now, Ralph Waldo Emerson gives a beautiful quote, and I would like to quote it in this context. He says, for every minute you remain angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace of mind. For every minute you are angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace of mind. And Lord Buddha has such mesmerizing and insightful quotes on this topic. One of the quotes by Lord Buddha is, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Now, we all have heard this and we all know that this is the right way to be. Being angry is not going to help anyone. To the contrary, it's going to harm the person who is harboring that. And understand this, self-love is not only about pampering yourself, but self-love is about constantly being vigilant towards our own thoughts, towards our own processes, towards our own mental thought programs. And the more vigilant and the more observational we become towards these mental thought patterns, we are being more of service to our own selves. Because the biggest dharma any human being has is with his own self. If you are not competent enough, if you are not taking care of yourself, you are not a useful human being. And to the contrary, you will serve as an impediment to the people around you as well. If you have traveled in flights, you would know that most of the times, every time, not most of the times, every time, the cabin crew advises that before assisting anyone else with their oxygen mask, you yourself need to be acquainted with that oxygen mask. Oftentimes, what we feel is that we might sideline ourselves and give a lot of focus and attention to the people around us. That's a great intention. But understand this, that if you are yourself baffled, you yourself are weak, you cannot give strength to any other person. If you yourself are financially poor, you cannot help someone with finance, or you cannot provide a financial aid to someone. And anger is probably that emotion which looks like strength, but it's not strength. In fact, to the contrary, it is a manifestation of fear. Because let's understand, why does a person become angry? Because the way the things have been happening, it's not the way he considers it should happen. The way he wants it to happen, it's not happening that way. As a result of that, he succumbs to anger. And he thinks that if I be angry, if I showcase anger, probably the thing is fixed. And most of the time, the thing does get fixed. But as a result of that, as a byproduct of that, the amount of toxicity which is released in the system, and more than the amount of toxicity which is released in the system, this conditioning gets reiterated or gets more powerful, that anger is needed to do certain things. Now, there is a certain amount of assertiveness which is needed, but that assertiveness can be anger free. Assertiveness is absolutely needed in situations wherein we need to function. But most of us don't understand the thin line of difference between assertiveness and being angry. Now, the reason I brought about and I thought to deliver this topic on anger is, you'll find people saying that the reason I'm so successful today is because of my anger. But if you look at these people, they have a history of heart ailments or any kind of medical conditions. It's so astonishing and unfortunate that heart attacks, which used to happen probably when you're 60 plus, is now happening to people when they are in their 30s and when they are in their 40s. Now, the number one reason this is happening is we are taking things for granted and we are not monitoring our own mental state in a vigilant manner. And if someone gets angry, they always think of ways of suppressing it or diverting their attention. They are all good, but nobody thinks about the root cause of anger. And I also want to share what Bhagavad Gita talks about, this emotion called anger. So Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that anger, if you look at the mechanics, right? Anger essentially is derived when a certain desire which you have, a certain understanding which you have that a certain situation should happen the way you want it to happen. And rightfully so, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have this kind of expectations. All I'm inviting you to consider is when that outer reality doesn't match your inner expectations, that's when anger arises. And desire, to the exaggerated form, can be called lust. Now, when we talk about lust, the only thing we get in our mind is sexual overindulgences. But lust is not only about sexuality. Lust can be for money, lust can be for fame, lust can be for anything which you have an obsessive desire about, that is basically lust. And when that thing is not happening as per what you want, as per the understanding you have, you are bound to get angry. And Lord Krishna says that anger is one of the sure pathways. It's like a shortcut to hell. Because once you are completely consumed with this emotion called anger, you lose sense, you lose all logical sense. And everything which comes out of anger is just a recipe for regret. There's a beautiful quote which says that you will give the best speech, the speech which you will regret later, if you are consumed by this emotion called anger. And the permanent remedy, the remedy which will serve us to come out of this toxic emotion, is firstly this understanding that this is not always justified. Anger is not justified. Because every time you say that anger is the solution, you are essentially reiterating or sort of strengthening that belief system which you already have from the conditioning of your childhood, that anger is justified in this situation. Anger has never solved any problem. Rightful, assertive understanding of the situation. And the problem with most of us is everyone thinks they are right. Most of us lack an objective point of view. Everyone wants to defend their opinion. And the people who get very easily agitated are the people who are deeply insecure individuals. They think that increasing the tone of their voice will make their substance or make the thing which they are arguing for stay with them. But if you look at histories, the greatest legends of histories, most of them were not angry people. To the contrary, the villains of our history were the people who had this demeanor of anger. And if you even look at the scene of Mahabharata, Lord Krishna is in a war zone. And most of us might think that in a war zone, anger is justified. But if you closely observe the plot of Mahabharata and the narrative of Mahabharata, you will see this, that Lord Krishna is saying Arjuna to fight the Kauravas or Duryodhan not through the consciousness of revenge, not through the consciousness of anger, but through the consciousness of duty, but through the consciousness of dharma. Meaning that the very reason Lord Krishna was giving to educate that Arjuna should start fighting Kauravas, when Arjuna was lamenting, saying that I don't see why I should fight with them. Lord Krishna says that you're not fighting them with the feeling of revenge, but you are fighting them to the consciousness that if these people, if Duryodhan can do these things, these atrocities with you, then just imagine the plight of a common man. So Lord Krishna had the consciousness of the common good, and that with that level of consciousness, he advocated Arjuna to fight, not through the consciousness of revenge and through anger. So this is a great example for us that if wars can be fought and won without the consciousness of anger, the everyday situations we go through, they are nothing but comedy, and we so easily get angry at those situations. Hope my today's video brought about a limelight, brought about a paradigm shift in your understanding as to why we shouldn't be angry. And you can always look at the things, the details as to what are the disadvantages of being angry. Everyone knows that, but I wanted to attack at this root belief system which suggests that anger is justified. And also stop using anger as a catalyst for your achievements. Because whenever our intentions are not clear, this is why spirituality is so very important for every person in this planet. Now, some of you might think spirituality is backward and what's there in being spiritual. But spirituality is not backward. Essentially, spirituality is inward. Spirituality is all about raising your consciousness and your awareness in trying to assess yourself, assess your own emotions, assess your own thought processes, and bringing about a clear demarcation as to what are the thoughts and beliefs which are serving you, and what are the thoughts and beliefs which serve as impediments to your own progress. Now, progress in itself can be multidimensional. Progress in your health, progress in your general state of happiness. Because everyone wants to be happy. If you ask any human being in this planet, they all want to be happy. And the reason why we are striving for all the goals and all the achievements and all the sensory enjoyments also, the number one goal is happiness. And there cannot be a better enemy for happiness than anger. So next time you get a situation where your conditioning is telling you to get angry, question that conditioning and ask itself, who is going to benefit out of this anger? Thank you so much for your time on my video. If you really did like this video, don't forget to share it with a couple of your friends so that everybody understands this unique narrative which I shared in this video about anger. Thank you so much, and if you really are enjoying the genre of content I am sharing in my channel, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to receive notifications on this channel. Thank you so much, and I'll meet you in the next video.